River flows as it always has, calm, unassuming, and vital to the communities surrounding it. But in the early 1980s, this seemingly ordinary stretch of water became the focal point of one of the most horrifying chapters in American criminal history. For 2 decades, the river was both a dumping ground and a witness, silently carrying the weight of unspeakable violence. It began quietly, as these things often do. In July 1982, the body of a young woman was found along the riverbank. Her name was Wendy Caulfield, a 16-year-old girl with a life ahead of her, cruelly cut short. She was just the beginning. Within weeks, more bodies began to surface, each discovery more chilling than the last. By the time the authorities realized they were dealing with a serial killer, the Green River had become synonymous with death. The victims shared chilling similarities. Many were young women, vulnerable and marginalized, making them easy targets for a predator who operated with methodical precision. They were promised safety, only to be met with unimaginable cruelty. The killer was meticulous, leaving little evidence behind. He seemed to anticipate the moves of law enforcement, slipping away like a shadow every time they thought they were close. The police were desperate, and so was the community. Fear gripped the neighborhoods near the Green River, turning once friendly streets into landscapes of suspicion. Families locked their doors, neighbors exchanged nervous glances, and parents warned their children never to go out alone. For the women who worked the streets, many of whom were struggling to survive, the warnings felt like a cruel echo of their reality. The case became a media sensation, with reporters flocking to the Green River to cover every grisly discovery. Headlines screamed of a predator on the loose, feeding a growing sense of panic. The public demanded answers, but the authorities were at a loss. The killer's cunning was matched only by his cruelty, and every promising lead seemed to end in frustration. The Green River Killer didn't rely on brute force alone. He was a master manipulator, someone who could blend seamlessly into the community while committing acts of unimaginable violence. He knew how to exploit vulnerabilities, how to avoid detection, and how to keep the police guessing. For years, he haunted the Pacific Northwest, a phantom whose crimes cast a long shadow over the lives of countless families. As the years passed, the case grew colder. Detectives retired, leads dried up, and the killer seemed to vanish. But the families of the victims never gave up hope. They held vigils, demanded action, and refused to let their loved ones be forgotten. For them, justice was not just a word, it was a promise they intended to keep. Then, in the early 2000s, science provided the breakthrough that investigators had been waiting for. DNA evidence, once an unthinkable tool, became the key to unraveling the mystery. Evidence that had sat untouched for decades suddenly came to life, revealing secrets that the killer thought would remain buried forever. Forensic scientists discovered a match, a name that had eluded investigators for over 20 years. Gary Ridgway, the man who had terrorized Washington state, was finally unmasked. His decades-long reign of terror brought to an end by the relentless march of technology. This is the story of the Green River Killer, a man who believed he was untouchable, only to be undone by the very progress he had underestimated. It is a story of loss, perseverance, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. What secrets did the Green River hold, and how did science finally expose the man who believed he was untouchable? Welcome to CrimeByte, the narrator begins, their voice steady yet tinged with gravitas, your portal into the darkest corners of human behavior. Here, we unravel the cases that defy logic, expose the truths buried beneath decades of mystery, and explore the minds of those who commit the unimaginable. In this episode, we delve into the chilling saga of the Green River Killer, a man whose reign of terror spanned over 2 decades, claiming the lives of young women and haunting an entire region. His crimes shook Washington state to its core, leaving families devastated and investigators determined to bring him to justice. But the road to answers was long, filled with dead ends and heartache. How does a killer hide in plain sight for so long? How do decades pass without justice? And how does science, relentless and precise, finally catch a predator who believed he was untouchable? At CrimeByte, we're not just here to recount crimes. We're here to uncover the untold layers of each story. Through archival footage, expert insights, and gripping storytelling, we aim to give you more than just the facts. We dive deep into the human stories behind the headlines, The victims, the families, the investigators, and even the perpetrators. What motivates such darkness? What keeps investigators going when hope seems lost? And what lessons can we learn from these tragedies to prevent them from happening again? This case is not just about a killer, the narrator continues. It's about the lives he destroyed, the families left to pick up the pieces, and the investigators who refused to give up, even when the trail ran cold. It's about resilience in the face of unimaginable loss, and the power of science to bring closure to those who deserve it most. For over 20 years, the Green River Killer remained a shadow, a phantom who preyed on the vulnerable and eluded justice at every turn. His cunning was matched only by his cruelty, and his ability to blend into the fabric of ordinary life made him one of the most chilling predators in history. But as science evolved, so did the hunt. Old evidence, once deemed insufficient, became the key to unlocking his identity. The persistence of investigators, paired with the relentless march of forensic technology, finally brought this nightmare to an end. Through this story, we are reminded that justice, though delayed, is never impossible. The Green River Killer thought he could outlast time, but the determination of those who sought the truth proved him wrong. This episode is not just about his capture. It's about the journey to uncovering the truth, the lives that were lost, and the lessons we must carry forward to ensure history does not repeat itself. At CrimeByte, we are committed to bringing you stories that matter, not just to recount the past, but to understand the present and shape the future. We believe that by exploring the darkness, we can shine a light on what it means to seek justice, to remember, and to heal. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories that reveal the chilling truths of human darkness. Together, let's uncover the secrets that should never stay hidden. The nightmare began on a quiet summer day in July 1982, when the Green River revealed its first grim secret. The body of 16-year-old Wendy Caulfield was found along its banks, her life cut tragically short. At first, it seemed like an isolated tragedy, a devastating loss for her family, and a painful mystery for investigators. But the Green River wasn't finished giving up its secrets. Just days later, another body surfaced, then another. The once serene river became the backdrop for a horror story unfolding in real time. By the end of the summer, 5 young women had been found, their lives violently stolen, and their bodies discarded like refuse. It was a pattern too chilling to ignore. The victims were all young, vulnerable women, many of whom had been living on the margins of society. They were runaways, sex workers, or struggling with addiction, women who had fallen through the cracks and into the grasp of a predator who saw them not as people, but as prey. As the bodies piled up, it became clear to investigators that they were dealing with more than just a string of murders. This was the work of a serial killer, someone who hunted in plain sight, striking fear into the heart of Washington state. The Green River Killer, as he would come to be known, didn't just take lives. He shattered a community's sense of safety, but justice seemed a distant hope. The early days of the investigation were marked by chaos and uncertainty. Detectives worked tirelessly, but every lead seemed to evaporate, leaving them with more questions than answers. Who was this killer? Why did he target these women? And how could he slip away time and time again? Despite their best efforts, the police found themselves outmatched by a predator who was always one step ahead. The Green River Killer seemed to vanish into thin air, leaving nothing but heartbreak and fear in his wake. And as the weeks turned into months, the river claimed more victims, each one a stark reminder of the darkness lurking just below the surface. Would investigators find the answers they so desperately sought, or would the Green River Killer remain an enigma haunting Washington state forever? The Green River Killer's victims were more than just statistics. They were daughters, sisters, and friends. Each had a story, a life filled with dreams and struggles. But to their killer, they were objects, targets selected for their vulnerability and disposed of without remorse. A chilling pattern began to emerge. The killer targeted young women, many of whom were sex workers or runaways. He exploited their vulnerabilities, offering rides or assistance before luring them into danger. Once he gained their trust, he struck with calculated brutality. His methods were disturbingly consistent. He often strangled his victims, a method that left little forensic evidence behind. Their bodies were then dumped along the Green River or or in secluded wooded areas where he believed they would remain hidden. But even in death, these women spoke volumes about the man who had taken their lives. Investigators believed the killer sought power and control, reveling in the fear and helplessness of his victims. He was methodical, ensuring his actions left as few clues as possible. Yet, his crimes revealed much about his psychology, a predator who thrived on manipulation and viewed his victims as disposable. The impact of his actions rippled far beyond the immediate tragedy. Families were left to grapple with unimaginable grief. Their lives forever changed. Communities were gripped by fear, their sense of safety shattered. And for the women who worked the streets, the knowledge that a killer was hunting among them became an ever-present shadow. As investigators worked to piece together the killer's methods, they faced a grim reality. The Green River Killer was meticulous, cunning, and unrelenting. Each victim, each pattern, brought them closer to understanding his motives. But would it be enough to stop him before he struck again? How do you stop a predator who knows his victims better than they know themselves? For years, the investigation into the Green River Killer consumed the lives of countless detectives, officers, and forensic analysts. Each new body brought a fresh wave of urgency, but with every new lead came the crushing weight of dead ends. The case was like a labyrinth, its twists and turns leading to nothing but despair. Interviews were conducted with anyone who might have information, neighbors, co-workers, and those who had last seen the victims alive. But the killer was careful, leaving no witnesses, no trail to follow. Suspects were brought in, interrogated and released, one by one, as evidence failed to connect them to the crimes. The media played a crucial role in amplifying the fear and frustration. Headlines screamed of the Green River Killer's latest victims, while television broadcasts speculated on his methods and motives. For the people of Washington, every news report was a reminder that the killer was still out there, watching and waiting. Despite their relentless efforts, the killer always seemed to stay one step ahead. It was as if he knew their moves before they made them. Rumors began to swirl that he monitored police activity, using a scanner to stay informed. Whether or not this was true, the result was the same. He vanished into the shadows after every crime, leaving investigators with nothing but questions. As the body count climbed, so did the pressure. Families of the victims demanded answers, their grief turning to anger as months turned into years without an arrest. The community's trust in law enforcement began to erode, and the Green River Killer became a symbol of fear and helplessness. Through it all, the detectives refused to give up. Each false lead, each dead end, only strengthened their resolve. They knew they were up against a predator who was both cunning and patient, and they were determined to stop him. But how do you catch someone who seems to anticipate your every move? Would they find the clue that would finally break the case, or would the Green River Killer continue to outsmart them? When the Green River Killer continued to elude capture, local authorities turned to the FBI for help. Behavioral analysts, experts in understanding the minds of predators, were brought in to create a psychological profile of the man they were hunting. What they discovered was as chilling as it was revealing. The profile painted a picture of a man who was manipulative, meticulous, and consumed by a desire for dominance. He likely lived a seemingly normal life, blending into his community while carrying out his horrific crimes in secret. This duality made him all the more dangerous, a predator hiding in plain sight. Investigators believed the killer was highly organized, planning his crimes with precision to avoid detection. He likely scouted his victims in advance, choosing those who were isolated or vulnerable. Once he gained their trust, he struck swiftly and brutally, leaving little evidence behind. But even with this detailed profile, the lack of concrete evidence kept the predator in the shadows. Detectives had a clearer picture of who they were looking for, but they still didn't know his name, his face, or where he would strike next. The psychological profile provided a framework, but the puzzle remained incomplete. The profile also revealed the emotional toll the case had taken on investigators. Understanding the killer's mind meant confronting the darkest aspects of human behavior, a task that weighed heavily on those tasked with stopping him. Yet they pressed on, knowing that the lives of countless women depended on their efforts. Despite the insights provided by the profile, the Green River Killer remained a phantom, a shadow that taunted investigators with every passing day. The question wasn't just how to catch him, but whether they could catch him before he struck again. Would the profile be enough to outsmart a predator who seemed to anticipate every move? For nearly 2 decades, the case of the Green River Killer had haunted Washington state. Victims' families had waited, investigators had searched tirelessly, and the riverbanks had held their secrets. But in the late 1990s, a revolution in forensic science offered something that had long eluded everyone involved: hope. DNA testing, once a distant dream, was now becoming a powerful tool capable of solving even the coldest of cases. Advancements in technology had made it possible to extract genetic material from evidence that had been sitting in storage for years. Old crime scenes, once thought to hold no usable clues, were revisited with a fresh set of eyes and new tools. It was a process of meticulous examination, requiring patience and precision, but the potential rewards were immeasurable. Forensic experts began analyzing samples collected from the original Green River crime scenes. Hair strands, fibers, and other minute traces that had been preserved now held the key to unlocking the mystery. The DNA extracted from these samples would be run through newly developed databases, searching for matches that could link the killer to his victims and to his crimes. After years of frustration, the persistence of investigators and the evolution of forensic science finally paid off. The DNA recovered from several victims was matched to a single individual. The evidence was irrefutable, the link undeniable. The Green River Killer, who had managed to remain hidden for so long, was about to be unmasked. But even with this monumental breakthrough, questions remained. Who was the man behind these horrors? How had he managed to escape justice for so long? And most chillingly, how many more secrets had he kept hidden? Could this finally be the end of the Green River Killer's reign of terror? Gary Ridgway was, by all appearances, an ordinary man, a devoted employee at a truck painting company, a father, and a neighbor. To those who knew him, he was quiet, reliable, even helpful. But beneath this facade lay the mind of a killer, a predator who had evaded capture for more than 20 years. When DNA evidence linked Ridgway to multiple Green River crime scenes, it marked the beginning of the end for one of America's most notorious serial killers. Investigators confronted him with the evidence, and the weight of 2 decades of horror came crashing down. Ridgway, who had so carefully concealed his crimes, could no longer hide from the truth. Ridgway's arrest sent shockwaves through his community. The man who had once been a trusted colleague and neighbor was now revealed as the Green River Killer, responsible for the deaths of at least 49 women, and possibly more. The quiet man who painted trucks during the day had spent his nights prowling the streets, hunting for victims. The arrest was a turning point, but it was only the beginning of uncovering the full extent of Ridgway's crimes. In interviews with investigators, he began to confess, revealing chilling details about how he chose his victims, how he lured them into his car, and how he disposed of their bodies. Ridgway's confessions painted a harrowing picture of a man who had spent decades perfecting his methods. He knew how to avoid detection, how to cover his tracks, and how to exploit the vulnerabilities of his victims. Yet, despite his meticulous planning, it was his own DNA that ultimately betrayed him. For investigators, the DNA evidence was more than just a breakthrough. It was a vindication of years of hard work and determination. For the families of the victims, it was a bittersweet moment. They finally had a name, a face, and an arrest, but it could never bring back the lives that had been lost. Gary Ridgway had spent decades hiding in plain sight, but the relentless pursuit of justice and the power of forensic science had finally brought him to light. Yet, even as he faced the consequences of his actions, one question lingered. How many more secrets was he still keeping? Would Ridgway's confessions reveal the full extent of his crimes, or were there still shadows left to uncover? When investigators confronted Gary Ridgway with the DNA evidence linking him to the murders, his facade crumbled. He knew there was no escape. What followed was a confession that shocked even the most seasoned detectives, an admission to 49 murders, though the true number of his victims may never be known. Ridgway's matter-of-fact tone as he described his crimes stunned investigators. He spoke of luring women into his truck with promises of money or safety, only to strangle them moments later. For him, it was mechanical, emotionless, a process perfected over decades. His methods were calculated, his motives chilling. Ridgway admitted to choosing women he believed would not be missed. Runaways, sex workers, and those living on the margins. He exploited their vulnerabilities, preying on their desperation and trust. In his mind, these women were disposable. Even as he recounted the details of his crimes, Ridgway remained eerily composed. He described how he would revisit the sites where he had left his victims, sometimes days or weeks later. For him, the act of killing was not enough. It was the control, the revisiting of his crimes that fed his twisted sense of power. Ridgway's confession provided closure to some, but it also opened new wounds. Families of victims who had waited years for answers were forced to confront the brutal reality of what had happened to their loved ones. Each name he uttered was a life lost, a family shattered, and a community scarred forever. For the detectives who had spent decades chasing shadows, Ridgway's confession was a bittersweet victory. They had caught the man responsible for so much pain, but the scale of his crimes left them questioning how he had remained free for so long. How had a man who seemed so ordinary concealed such extraordinary evil? What drives a man to commit such unimaginable acts, and how many more secrets might he still be hiding? Gary Ridgway's trial became one of the most infamous in American history. The man who had spent decades hiding his crimes now sat in full view of the public, his monstrous acts laid bare for all to see. But even as the evidence against him mounted, Ridgway showed no emotion, no remorse. To him, this was simply the final act in a story he had controlled for so long. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA analysis, eyewitness testimony, and Ridgway's own confession painted a picture of a man who had committed his crimes with chilling precision. But for the families of his victims, the trial was about more than justice. It was about giving a voice to those who could no longer speak for themselves. Ridgway's guilty plea spared him the death penalty, but it did little to ease the pain of those he had hurt. For many, his sentencing was a hollow victory. The man who had caused so much suffering would spend the rest of his life behind bars. But the questions he left unanswered continued to haunt those affected by his crimes. Forensic experts, legal analysts, and psychologists all weighed in on the trial, each trying to understand what had driven Ridgway to commit such heinous acts. But even as they dissected his motives, the man himself remained an enigma, silent, emotionless, and unrepentant. Ridgway's sentencing provided some measure of closure, but it also left many questions unanswered. How had he managed to evade capture for so long? How many more victims might there be? And what does his story teach us about the dangers lurking beneath the surface of ordinary life? Is justice ever enough when the scars of a monster's crimes run so deep? The Green River Killer left a permanent scar on Washington state. His decades-long reign of terror shattered families, haunted communities, and forced a region to confront the depths of human depravity. While Gary Ridgway's arrest provided some answers, the pain he inflicted could never truly be undone. For the families of Ridgway's victims, the resolution of the case was bittersweet. On one hand, his capture and confession ended years of uncertainty, finally giving them the closure they had longed for. On the other, it forced them to relive their darkest moments, hearing the gruesome details of how their loved ones had been taken. The community, once gripped by fear and suspicion, struggled to heal. For years, the Green River Killer had lurked in their midst, a phantom who turned their quiet neighborhoods into hunting grounds. The revelation that the man responsible had been one of their own, a seemingly ordinary truck painter, shattered their sense of security. Law enforcement also faced a reckoning. While advances in forensic science ultimately led to Ridgway's arrest, the case exposed the limitations of traditional investigative methods. Detectives who had dedicated their lives to solving the murders were left questioning what more they could have done, haunted by the thought of the lives that might have been saved. In the wake of Ridgway's arrest, the community came together, vowing to honor the victims by ensuring that such horrors would never be repeated. Neighborhood watch programs were established, resources were directed towards supporting at-risk individuals, and educational campaigns aimed to raise awareness about the dangers of predatory behavior. Though the scars remain, the resilience of the community shines through. They refused to let Ridgway's crimes define them, choosing instead to focus on healing and unity. Their strength, serves as a testament to the power of collective determination in the face of unimaginable tragedy. How do we rebuild trust and safety after facing such profound darkness? The Green River Killer case stands as a milestone in the history of forensic science. A case that demonstrated the power of persistence, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of justice. It transformed the way law enforcement approaches cold cases, proving that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds, answers are always within reach. DNA technology, still in its infancy when the murders began, became the key to unlocking one of the most perplexing mysteries in American criminal history. What was once considered inconclusive or unusable evidence became the linchpin that brought Gary Ridgway to justice. This breakthrough forever changed the landscape of forensic investigation. The lessons learned from the Green River case reshaped investigative practices worldwide. Law enforcement agencies began prioritizing the preservation of evidence, knowing that future advancements in technology could provide answers where current methods fell short. The case also underscored the importance of collaboration between local police, federal agencies, and forensic scientists. For the families of the victims, the memorial stands as a symbol of resilience and remembrance. It is a place to grieve, to reflect, and to honor the lives that were taken too soon. But it is also a reminder of the power of perseverance, the determination to seek justice, no matter how long it takes. The legacy of the Green River Killer extends beyond the lives he took. His case serves as a cautionary tale, a call to vigilance, and a testament to the capabilities of modern science. It is a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable evil, humanity's capacity for justice and progress prevails. As technology continues to evolve, so too does our ability to solve the mysteries of the past. The Green River Killer case proved that time is not an obstacle to justice. It is a challenge to be overcome. And as we look to the future, the question remains, what other secrets might DNA unlock? And how can we ensure that no predator ever escapes accountability again? The Green River Killer case is a story of heartbreak, perseverance, and justice, hard won. For decades, this river concealed secrets too dark to imagine. It was here that countless lives were ended and countless more were forever changed. But it was also here, through the tireless efforts of investigators, scientists, and families, that those secrets were finally brought to light. Every one of these women had a story, a family, a future, and dreams that were cruelly stolen. Gary Ridgway may have taken their lives, but he could not erase their impact. Their memory endures, a reminder of the fragility of life and the resilience of the human spirit. This case taught us that no mystery is too cold, no trail too old, and no crime too well hidden to escape justice. It showed the power of persistence and the incredible strides of forensic science. But most importantly, it reminded us of the importance of community, of people coming together to demand answers and refuse silence. Justice in this case was not just about capturing a killer. It was about restoring dignity to those who were lost, providing closure to those who grieved, and ensuring that the lessons of the past guide us into the future. The Green River Killer case stands as a testament to the enduring fight for truth and accountability. The legacy of this case extends beyond its resolution. It transformed how law enforcement tackles cold cases, reinforced the need for vigilance in our communities, and inspired breakthroughs in science that continue to solve mysteries today. But it also left us with a sobering question. How do we prevent tragedies like this from happening again? This has been CrimeByte, your portal into the darkest corners of human behavior. Cases like this remind us of the duality of humanity, the capacity for unspeakable evil, but also for resilience, courage, and the relentless pursuit of justice. If you found this story compelling, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to CrimeByte, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We look into the stories that define our understanding of justice, exploring the lessons that shape our world. But we also want to hear from you. What do you think about the Green River Killer case? How do you feel about the role of forensic science in solving crimes? And what lessons do you believe we should carry forward? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We value your voice in this ongoing conversation. How can we ensure that no crime remains unsolved, no victim forgotten, and no community left in fear? The answer begins with all of us.